Hello, and welcome to the Quantum Bridge with myself, Casper, my cat BB,
Mhm.
unfortunately, and obviously my co-host Gary. Hi, mate. How are you doing?
Good, thank you. Yeah,
Good,
yourself?
good. And we're really fortunate yet again to have another guest joining us, a new guest, which is always exciting. And since Gary found our new guest, I'll pass over to Gary. But I'll just quickly say hello anyway. Hello. Don't give
Hello,
away
Well,
your name.
Casper. Yes. Hi, Gary.
welcome to the show.
Thank
So,
you.
yeah, I met you via X, like a lot of our guests, and
Yes.
I enjoyed your posts and invited you on. You even have given me some culinary advice, and tried to tempt me to eat mushrooms, which I despise. So, but beyond that, we're going to hear a little bit about yourself for the audience, and you are the founder of Lila Life. That's right. I've got that right, didn't I? Almost forgot again. So yeah, Casper and myself, we don't know much about that, so it'd be great to hear everything. But
Awesome.
maybe you could start with where you're based and then how this all came about.
Absolutely. Thank you both. And I appreciate your work. And it's an honor to be here. I'm Linda Andrews, CEO and founder of Lila Life, which I help emerging entrepreneurs in their business and usually navigate before business some transitions to prioritize business, architecture, and well-being. And I can share a little bit about how I got to that.
Mm,
I had a career in finance. I had all these gifts emerging, and I had my own healing journey. And as I was navigating each of those pretty parallel, I found some interests and some loves and some ways to serve. And that's what Lila Life is. So, in addition to the work I do one on one with people through integrative advisory, where I combine that business and financial side with the well being, I also have the Lila Life Show podcast, which comes out weekly, where I talk about some of these topics and just haven't been enjoying on X, exploring some thought leadership and some of the crazy things that come down in my mind. But I say the underpinning of the work that I do is prosperity, consciousness, and well-being. And through those parallel journeys I was taking, those are what the common threads were and are. And maybe we could distill that all down to consciousness or just a word or a number. We could get into that maybe. And beyond that, yeah, just it's been my own curiosities and in the curiosities, learning something, each thing I learn shifts everything pretty drastically. And then it's the recalibrating and the deepening of the integration and my own going through that process, being able to empower others has been the guiding light. And the last thing I'll add is Lila is a word I learned in yoga teacher training that means divine play in Sanskrit. It was an accident that my initials are LA now, Linda Andrews. And so it feels like it's all connected, but it wasn't. That word just felt so beautiful to me. And that divine guidance, that divine spark, that divine inspiration. And also, if you think of like an actor and the play that we're all acting in, that's another way I like to interpret that. And just good old fashioned fun, right? And using those as guidance in what work we're each doing or ways that we all want to serve in the world. I'm just curious about what the world can look like when that's happening. And we each have our own specific makeup and gifts. And how can we activate that and be in that flow, each as individuals, and what happens to the collective when that's happening? And from what I can see, that's far from happening. And I talk sometimes about the inversion. It just feels like just the opposite, the opposite of sense making. And I was involved through the UK community for a while, that sense making 101. I forget everyone that ran it. It was years ago. But that experience really opened my eyes. And I'm like, oh yeah, it doesn't make sense. This is nonsense. So what else can emerge when you can accept that there's nonsense in front of you? And that feels like a nice summary.
Yeah, lovely. And I totally with you on the whole thing of inversion. I think Gary is too. And
mm,
I'm also sort of keen to understand because most of the people that we seem to get on these days have had some sort of, they might have had some book, quote unquote, book learning. So they might have been interested in more esoteric subjects than maybe sort of people who followed more mainstream paths, or they've had some sort of immediate awakening or slower awakening that's led them to certain materials and so on. Is there anything in your background that's either been a sort of immediate trigger or a memory that's brought you onto a slightly different path than maybe many others have taken? And also, I suppose the other part of that is, is there specific learning that you base your work on, or has that come out of a more intuitive or a download like sort of sense and experience? I'm just interested to frame where, because what you covered was quite a lot, where much of that comes from.
Absolutely. Thank you, Caspa. And when I was born, 10 days into my life, I was baptized for contracting a rare childhood illness. And the side effects of that, in my understanding, actually directly affects the nervous system. And I think I always had some extra sensory gifts that I didn't understand through most of my life. That was one of many near-death experiences that I experienced in my life. So I think those experiences were a natural conduit to more that I couldn't understand. One of the first seeking, like I always was asking the big questions as early as I could understand. I would go to bed at night and I would just see black and I would just be so sad. Like, that's it. Like, it's just darkness, and be afraid that death was darkness. And I can remember being very young and having that experience, say like 10, 11, 12, and being really afraid. So I think a lot of this sprung from me wanting to make sense of that. I had from a young age a writing practice, and it was an avid reader. So those were always just naturally, I think, undercurrents that helped a lot. But as a high performance athlete, I was an elite swimmer from a pretty young age. I got a college scholarship. I was a team captain. I did some interesting things in the swim world. Didn't make it to the Olympics. Was always hopeful to go even more. But as performance is so front and center to your life, even at a young age, I was like, how can I be a better swimmer? And so as soon as I could drive, at the time, yoga was emerging more and more, but I wanted to use yoga to be a better athlete. And so I'm 16, skipping high school to go to yoga to be a better swimmer. And it was like an obsession with the sport, obsession with performance. And I look back and think of the seeds that were planted at that age. So there's so much. I mean, I could talk about the levels and the layers. It's all of it. It's all of it. There's so much that's influenced from reading, formal study, informal study, esoteric, extremely clinical science. It's it all. And that integration of it's all continues to be the guiding light for me. It's all connected. Like, the issues are the fractures. The issues are thinking that it's not connected. It's all connected. And for me, that feels like an instant sacredness, an instant awareness, an instant reverence for life, for this experience. We're sitting together as somewhat strangers in a moment, connected through Twitter, X, to talk about these topics. How can you tell me life is not a mystery? And this is just one aspect of all the seconds of my day that I will find equally as mysterious and curious, and that's colored by my morning. So I think some of these near-death experiences also made life very real to me, like the gift, the presence, and am I in that every single second? No, but I'm in this a lot. And when I'm not in this, I can tell, and then I can come back to the center. And I'm happy to share any specific practices you want to know more, but that was more about the journey. And
no, that's perfect.
Yeah, COVID was a very, the coronavirus. I happened to get married February of 2020. And so I was experiencing that at the same time as, this global crisis, and the activations that came through two experiences that for very different reasons had me grow and learn in so many different ways. That it's been 4 years. I celebrated that anniversary this weekend. So what a wild 4 years. And I joke with my husband, he's also an elite athlete and was a swimmer. And I'm like, our 4-year anniversary is on an Olympic year and a presidential year, or an election year. Like, the energetics of that and being on those 4-year cycles, I find fascinating.
It's pretty wild, yeah.
Yeah. Talking of energy, just a very quick question, Gary. You might want to jump in with all sorts of things. I know you're sort of more familiar anyway, but this thing of, you obviously have access to a great deal of energy, and even just on that more physical level, you clearly did with the swimming and being so incredibly driven. I am quite keen to understand where you think that drive derived from, but I also wonder, in terms of that energy, it's one of those things that can consume you, or it can be used as a great catalyst to do amazing things in the quote unquote world. How do you feel about that? Do you see that sort of energetic as both a blessing and a curse to some degree, or has that purely been a blessing in your life?
It's definitely been a blessing and a curse. It felt like a little trick question, it's the both sides of it, but understanding how to harness the energy and to be understanding of, I'm a conduit, like I'm a divine conduit. And that's a very clear image to me. It's coming through my head, it's coming through my feet. I'm a divine conduit through my heart center. That probably a decade ago started to click in a lot more real to me. And so the blessing and the curse always, and then understanding how to use the energy, how to work with the energy, made it more manageable. And being grounded, being able to understand my nervous system, it allows the energy to feel way more like a blessing than a curse.
Yeah.
Maybe other people think it's a curse because they're getting, the amped, but with that, I also have to make sure there's downtime and there's rest and there's proper care. And that's been a really beautiful journey of intimacy with myself that, I continue to explore and discover. And, I can see the ancestral connections to so much of my life. My grandpa was a swimmer. I'm Finnish on my mom's side. So he was like a world-class at the time, Finnish athlete training in America, I believe. And just understanding the family stories. They had a health spa, there's farming on another side of my family. So you see how all these influences, even at the subconscious level, can come to play in the reality of life. And that drive, my dad and brother were college athletes on the football. My brother played lacrosse. There's just some of this that feels so beyond me, but always quite driven, wanting straight A's, wanting, and you see those imprints of the perfection. And some of that can also then be the curse, because it's hard to accept yourself when you're never perfect, because you always have to be perfect. And that perpetuates drive as well.
Yeah, I think I was alluding actually to exactly that thing of, in your younger, even younger life, I would have thought that could just be incredibly wonderful on one side, because it means that you excel in a certain way. But then the sort of, I suppose, those voices that are always saying you could do better, you could be better, and whatever, that maybe is the hard bit to manage. So you get all this physicality and this drive, despite obviously what's happened to you historically, which seems, we can touch on that, which seems to be some tough events there. But you've got all of that, but at the same time, particularly when you're younger, those tend to be very hard aspects to sort of juggle. And as you've touched on the words, sort of to become centered again, that whole centering process is tough, particularly through things like adolescence. So it's quite nice to hear you talk about it as if you've somewhat come out the other side, because I can imagine that was very tumultuous.
It was. And with swimming as a sport, you can always go 1/100th faster. And I didn't realize that until I was far removed from the sport. And that same thinking pattern, you can always do everything 1/100th better.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of power. It makes me curious. Like, I'm looking at a cup holder right now, and this could sound like OCD, what I'm about to say. The cup holder that has the pens is out of order. It's chaotic. I can see that right now. And so I can look at it and say, oh, I could make that look better. And that's truth. That's a fact. Right. But at the point that my whole life is derived to make those adjustments, it could go too far, but it could also be precision. And I think there's something about precision in the world, that there's a beauty and a truth to precision that it's OCD. It's like, no, the truth of the matter is that cup is out of order, and it could be in more order. And I could take 3 seconds to adjust that cup. Right. it's just an interesting thing to
How
play
much
with.
pain is that cup giving you at this precise
So I'm newer to adapting principles of the of precision in my life and harmony. I had a lot of things to be very chaotic, so it's pretty easy. It's my default
Okay.
mode, as they would say,
Okay, yeah,
is
fine.
the chaos. I've kind of come out of the chaos too.
I'm
I mean,
glad
I
you
was going to
can't
say
see
to you,
any of this desk here, because
Yeah.
this is
yeah, that's
Yeah, we're got
right.
the above view.
Yeah, don't
Yeah.
don't even go there. A final thing from me, I'll pass it across to Gary. Just to say, I am a big fan of this whole thing of the aesthetic of things, despite how I look, right? But in terms of the beauty of the aesthetic in the world, and that actually having some direct correlation to, even as we move through these various dimensions and the seeking of perfection and whatever, that if there was a unifying theory of anything, I think that would have an aesthetic to it. So I don't think we should be too hard on ourselves when we look at something and think that could be
Could it
more
be more
ordered and more
beautiful?
beautiful. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
I'll leave it at that.
No,
Yeah.
and I will add, my name, Linda, means pretty or beautiful in Spanish. And that's been something that's been in my consciousness my whole life. My dad would call me beautiful. It's just something that I had a very real awareness of. Growing up in this area of South Florida, I could drive to school through Palm Beach Island, some of the most beautiful real estate with all the aspects of the story that go with it, right? With the ocean right there. And there was a trip I took years ago with my husband before we got married to Bali for a month. And I came back from that trip and had such heartbreak because I looked around and I thought, where's the beauty? Like they were able to develop, and I know they're on clearly a different timeline and all these different things, but there was this effervescent beauty. It was palpable. You could taste it. You could feel it. It was in everything. And then you come to the airport here and everything is cement and there's not as many, and it can change and evolve. But I think we've lost sight of some of that. That can be some of the dis-ease and some of the disharmony because of that beauty piece. So I'm with you. How can I make this more beautiful?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
1/100th more beautiful.
That's right. 100.
I have to say, I don't remember the account. There was an account on X, and he would post, how far we've fallen, I would say, in design sense of what we would call mundane things. So it was like in the UK, you'd have like bollards, and it'd be like, now it's just a concrete thing. Where in the past it actually, even a functional thing like that had design attributes to it, and the lamp posts and your door knocker, now
it's angles. Like I first noticed this with shoes. I had a really weird shoe thing, and I remember being in college, I was buying all these heels, and it was the angles, and I would be like obsessing with my friends, like, look at the angles of this high-heeled shoe. I never heard other people talking about shoes in this way. And I can look at design now, and it's the captivation through the angles, which gets to the math piece of it. And this is newer study for me, is just understanding the truth through numbers and the beauty and the design and the aesthetic that directly connects to that. It's overwhelmingly obvious.
Yeah, it was it was an interesting particular little video that Trump did. It's the one where he talks about taking a quantum leap. And in that, he actually mentions this thing of beautification. And you think, wow, we're starting to hear some of these words when it comes to moving forward. So that was interesting as well, as long as the flying cars and things. But we shall see.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, in that, how old is this new project of yours then, this business?
This business, I'm in, it hasn't been a straight line, but I could say 5 years. The actual business entity is 2 years old. And but the consciousness of Lila life is 5 years old.
Oh, okay.
Going on 2018. I left my financial career in 2018. And earlier that year, I had launched the brand in 2018. And it's taken, some different twists and turns. At one point, I had brought on a number of different coaches that I had working with me. Now it's me as the sole integrative advisor, but I'm working on some tech on the back end to help it be easier for founders to hit the financial milestones that they want to hit. I think about, if 1 billion people on the planet had a business generating $1 million a year, what would happen through that capital flow? And that result would be quadrillion in capital. And it makes me laugh because I think, we right now are operating in trillions. Oh, trillions. And who's going to be the first trillionaire? I think Taylor Swift in a lot of ways is a really interesting cultural figure, a self-made female billionaire breaking all these records. Are we just witnessing the integration of tech that has to have quantum leaps as the outcome? And so to say 8 billion billionaire or 1 billion billionaires each generating $1 million in revenue, that's quite the quantum leap. Like if that were to happen today, everything would be different. And that's the energetics of what I believe that we're in right now. Everything is becoming different. And, maybe that bar was so low. Like maybe we were never really doing that great to begin with. And I say that because of how much the tech has changed. We couldn't, right? But now we can. And so it's an apples to oranges. It's not fair to say, well, like, oh, Elton John had his records blown up by Taylor Swift. These are completely different things. Is Taylor Swift more of an iconic figure than an Elton John? Maybe to some people, but maybe there was specific levers that she and her team used through business that generated that outcome. And what does that happen as that becomes easier to understand for more and more people?
Yeah. I mean, obviously this is something you've been passionate about and wanting to do. How are you finding that in terms of where the, if you want to call it the collective or the client base, is there a demand sort of matching where you want it to be, or you still feel that you're sort of early?
Yeah, I do feel early still. What I will say is that a lot of business, I think business done the right way is the right way, quote unquote, is creating something of value to solve a problem. And so for me to understand some of my downloads that I have been getting over the past several years and connect those to very clear, tangible problems that are existing in the world today. And so what's the problem that I've identified is that it's very challenging to make a professional transition and create a thriving business, which I'm defining as $1 million in annual revenue, just as like, that's an easy milestone. So that is actually quite a huge demand. And the offering to pair to that, to have it all make sense. And I'm in that position right now in the scaling where I'm the active service provider, but how long can that go in this way? And so these are some of those back end shifts. So the demand is continuing to grow. The better I can be at telling my story and sharing the service, but that hyper focus on what is the problem and what is the way to solve that problem in the most efficient way that the person purchasing my solving problem value, right, can access and use that in a way that it's easy for them. So right now I offer once a month, twice a month, once a quarter as touch points for you and your business growth. And what are the different ways? Like I got feedback last week that someone was like, could you do text on demand? And that's a feature. Like, yeah, let's figure out how we can do text on demand. And so for me, understanding how to make these tech pivots to where I'm building out the team and we're able to serve with tech and in a way that people want to digest this. So I'm in the process of doing 300 user interviews. I just have started that this month. And, so I'm early, I'm late, I'm new, I'm old, I'm all of it. And I think that that's a beautiful part of this journey is you take all those learnings, they're compounding and you're iterating and you're making sure it makes sense and you're making it clear and you're making it less confusing and you're making it digestible and you're making it be what the person with the problem needs it to be. And that has very little to do with me. It has to do with me serving them and figuring that out, which if you remember from earlier today, I'm very curious. So I'm very driven to like, how can we make this? Because what I don't understand, and this was a thread that's been really fun for me to follow, to get to $1 million of revenue is a very specific input times another specific input, dollars for that output, right? This is not rocket science. Why are there so many issues? I just cannot understand why there's so, and yes, we can talk about regulation and some of these other challenges, but just the pure fundamentals of business, there's not much rocket science going here. So I wanted to make that as simple and as clear to people that want to have a business and serve through business. And that's what I'm working on. So that's a little bit of the thread of that discovery.
Yeah.
And are you seeing with that actually it's the labyrinth of our own minds that is the biggest barrier here, not actually anything to do with whether these things are feasible, unfeasible, and so on? Because my sense with this, and I do a similar thing, I offer a sales seminar at the moment, which is just being referred to as a holistic marketing sort of thing. I don't know, somebody else gave it that name and I thought it was quite nice. But all I'm sort of trying to get at is the sense I get with the people that I have at the moment, and it's a lovely, beautiful group of people, and this is very new, but that all of us, myself included, the real barrier here, and there's many structures that you need to work out, and you're right about regulations, all those other things, but actually the main one is, at a fundamental level, do you believe this is achievable as an individual? And I don't know how much you do or don't resonate with that, but that's sort of what I'm seeing.
Absolutely. I believe business is like the ultimate medicine journey. It's the ultimate, every single thing of your things. It's the non-specific amplification of all your stuff through the journey of business. And a lot of people don't even understand that that's about to happen. They're going on like a big 5-6 year psychedelic quest, right? Quote unquote, that it could be looked at in that way. That's the medicine, and all of your stuff is going to be amplified. And if you have not done much work on your stuff, you're a bad communicator, you have anger, you blow up, you don't have emotional control, all these different things that can make it challenging. You're an impulsive spender. I mean, I spent $15,000 on my first marketing person. I couldn't write the check fast enough. It ended up being a big scam. It was a hard lesson. It took me years to undo that. It's all there for you through business. And so I think that that's something it'd be great to speak a little bit more about, because I think especially at the early stages, it's easy to brush over that, get in survival mode, grow, get the money, and then you may have created something that you're like, what did I even build? Even if it's providing value in the marketplace. So that alignment piece is critical.
That's
getting
exactly
back
right.
to the topics earlier. So
would it be something good, for you to come back and discuss with us on that thing? Because
I would absolutely love to.
I mean, I'd also like to get into, because you do a lot of posts about, the new sort of ways we can do things. And we've spoken with some other guests about this thing of fighting the old or building the new, and I do some posts about that. So, maybe stop wasting your energy fighting here. It's
well, there can be
there
can be an addictiveness to the old, right? It's there's like a safety and an attachment to what's old, uncovering the old, learning the old. There could be appropriate utility to some of that, but I find it as simple as, what is your ratio of consumption to creation? We're creating right now, right? Okay, so we got a couple dots in the creation. How does that pair to our consumption? And that ratio is going to share to you what your life feels like. And if you're creating and then that turns into something you're selling, right, and you're serving through that, you're going to see your revenues go up. But if you're in a, say, 90% consumption loop and a 10% creative loop, that may not be enough to move the dial. And I think there's a reality to, like, what is the intention? What am I learning from this? What is this consumption of the old and the news helping me get to? And so much of that can be driven by certainty and control. And just like, okay, I need to know. And what happens when you're in creation? It's uncertainty. We don't know what's going to happen. So there's such an addictive loop to the known and the keeping things as they are. One quick story I'll share. In 2021, I was sharing a 3-second story. But in 2021, I felt really frustrated about the world, and I had started for years getting into farming and soil regeneration, and that had been heavy on my consciousness for years. Anyway, I said, this is what I can do. I can start a food forest, and I took a 10 by 20 plot of our land, about 200 feet, and I planted all these trees. I installed them all myself, You know, we were eating starfruit last week, which I think you might have seen. And that was what I could do. And so I think that that's a really easy way to ground yourself, is when you're giving energy to consumption, can you track that to then, what is this inspiring me to create, and see what you're giving yourself space and room for, what can emerge from that thought process. You may be consuming something, there's nothing you can do about it, and all that life force energy is getting depleted because of that loop. And I think it's first just to be aware of that ratio, and then understand where that opportunity for that creative life force energy that's pulsing through every single human, when we let it, where that wants to take us.
There we go.
We'll have to leave it on that note.
Fantastic.
Do come back. Come back.
I will.
And see
Thank
us
you
again.
both so much. I wish you a beautiful day and blessings to everyone. And just remember this moment, this moment, this moment.
Thank you.
Much love. Take care.
Yeah.